Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm your host, George Almasri. Myuren is a commercial appraiser and an investor as well. He's been investing since 2019, and his growth has been pretty impressive. He was on this episode, he talked about how he started with a single family home and basically bought properties every couple months since 2019 and has grown his portfolio to 14 properties, over 40 doors. So the way he was able to do it was with creative financing, thinking outside the box, doing multiple projects at once, recycling capital, all the good things that you guys have heard, but I haven't had someone on the podcast in a while talk about their journey and their growth the way he has. So I think you're really going to enjoy the content. If you do, again, just make sure to share this with somebody who would benefit from it and would be potentially encouraged by the information they absorb from this interview. So if you'd like to connect with me and talk about multi-unit investing, I'd be more than happy to share information on available opportunities, either on market or off market, analyzing deals together, that sort of thing. You can connect with me on Instagram, WellOffX, or by going to welloff.ca and booking a call or finding my contact information there. So I hope you'll enjoy the episode. Here you go. This episode was brought to you by Mortgage Dawn with Go Pineapple. I'm here with Myuren today. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Tell me about your childhood. Where'd you grow up? A couple things you remember.
So I was born in Toronto, Canada, 1995. Originally was living in downtown Toronto, and then my parents moved to Vaughan, not too far from here, in Concord, around the Dufferin Center Street. Pretty much my entire childhood until I went to university and graduated, and after that my parents relocated to Woodbridge, so more on the west end in Vaughan, and during that time I did live in downtown Toronto for about a year.
Okay. So born in Toronto, moved to Concord, then Woodbridge, and then tell me a bit more about your journey, about how you got involved in commercial appraisals and that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. So I went to Ryerson University, now known as Toronto Metropolitan University.
Oh, I didn't know it changed.
Yeah, it changed earlier this year or late last year.
Okay.
So, which is funny because I went to Vaughan Secondary School and they changed the name of Vaughan Secondary School to another name, which I forgot what it was. So, both schools I went to doesn't even exist.
Oh, yeah.
So when I went to Ryerson, they had a real estate management program, and it was a year in 2013 that they started. I wasn't really exposed to it as much because it was pretty brand new. So I did economics out of the business major, but a lot of the friends that I knew of, they were in the real estate management program, and there was a lot of networking events, and they had a lot of relationships with a lot of the major commercial real estate brokerage. So by fourth and fifth year, after trying to get my life sorted out in terms of where I really want my career to go, I decided to kind of go to a lot of these networking events, build relationships, and then message a lot of people on LinkedIn. Coffee chats, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Out of every 10 messages, maybe 20, maybe one person will be willing to reach out to me. And then as I continued to meet more individuals and professionals, they referred me to other people within the industry. So when you get referred to someone else by someone that you know, most likely they'll respond to you rather than reaching out to that person for the first time. So one person led to another, and I really wanted to start my career at Cushman & Wakefield, or one of the top firms. So you got CBRE, Colliers, and Cushman has something available, which through my network was on Global Occupier Services, was on their team, and then now I work for a commercial real estate brokerage based out of the US. They expanded to Toronto and now across Canada, and I'm on their valuation and advisory, so more of a consulting practice for commercial real estate.
Got it. So I actually have a pretty similar story. When I got my real estate license in 2013, and then around 2016, I became interested in investing in real estate. So I just went on Google and started looking for anyone that was involved in investing. I would Google buy your house for cash or whatever and reach out to those people. And I think one person got back to me out of 20 or something, but that one person changed the trajectory of my life because he taught me about the BRRRR strategy. And then from there, I was like, oh, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
And I think that back then it was much harder because social media wasn't what it was now compared to in 2013. I don't think Instagram was even at that level where you can just search and find people, and not many people were sharing their stories as much as they were a decade ago. but glad it worked out,
Yeah.
right?
You also said that, so you did economics at Ryerson,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a lot of friends that were in the real estate or in a real estate program. Was that just like that? That seems unusual because I don't really know none of my friends went into a real estate program, anything like that. Nobody from high school that I know went into anything like that. So what was the case for you guys?
So for a university that was in downtown Toronto, which is the largest real estate hub of Canada, in addition to Vancouver, there was no real estate program. The only undergrad program available was in Guelph, where they have the housing program. But in terms of where all the commercial real estate brokerages are located, in terms of their head office, was in downtown Toronto. So when the real estate management program came out in 2013, didn't really do much due diligence on it. But from what I understood is like, why do I need to do a real estate management undergrad? Because you don't really need a real estate degree to do real estate. But on the commercial real estate, you do get that exposure, especially with co-op. So I know a lot of the people now, like the real estate management program, from what I've heard right now, is really, really good in terms of what the network they have with and the relationship they built. But back then, it was fairly new. Now with these guys that I was friends with, I'm more closer with them now. But back then, it was just like friends, but like, you see them say hi and whatnot. But it was through that I saw how their career developed, and I'm like, shoot, like I didn't get the same opportunity. But at the end of the day, sometimes network and relationships can always kind of build that trajectory. So whereas your business degree doesn't really matter, like any business degree doesn't really matter. Like that, I know I see some people doing entrepreneurship. Like you don't really need an entrepreneurship undergrad to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's true.
So marketing, same thing, but it really comes down to what you take in and what you apply to the real world. And like I said, like investing, nobody really teaches you how to invest. Like they provide you with the guidance, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to take that foot forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like in my case, when I was getting my real estate license, you had a choice to pick certain elective courses,
Right.
and one of them was investment analysis.
Okay.
I remember I took that one and I did really well. I think I scored like a 98 on that because I was really interested in the content and the material, and we covered commercial, evaluating commercial properties, that sort of thing. So
I should have done that. I was just choosing elective that were like I did history. I was like general knowledge stuff, but I didn't. Yeah, looking back, I should have done something like that.
you have your real estate license? Or?
No.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
I don't transact real estate.
Okay, got it. Yeah. All right. So you became a commercial appraiser, and then what led to you actually investing in real estate?
So
And also, actually, sorry, before we get into that, when you say commercial appraisal, are you talking appraiser? Are you talking about like industrial offices, like that kind of thing?
So office buildings, industrial land, development projects, so multifamily, condominium, casinos, hotels. I've done like dispensary farms, like agricultural land. Uh, so anything commercial related, residential like single family home duplexes, like we don't really touch. But if you have a parcel of land where you're doing development, and it really comes down to the lender and how they want their financing to be. But ideally, anything on the commercial side, you're getting commercial financing. So that's when we kind of come in.
Yeah. So aside from probably vacant land, would you say that the other properties or projects
Yeah.
would be evaluated with cap rates and whatever that's called, the income approach?
Yes. So there's two approaches to value. So we got the discounted cash flow as well as the direct capitalization. So typically, if you're a single tenant or a few tenants in a building, multifamily, you're typically using the direct cap approach because there's only limited tenants in the building. But once you get into multi-tenant, retail, industrial, where there are different lease structures, we kind of use something called Argus, where we do our cash flow analysis. That's a bit more complex. That's where it's more due diligence because you got to review the leases, look at the lease escalations, the renewals, some of the options, and kind of put that into the system to kind of know what the true value of the building is. But for me, I kind of specialize in multifamily. That's where my bread and butter is because I invest in it. And a lot of the networks that I have within the real estate community in Ontario, and I do Ontario, and the rest of the team, they do Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. I'm doing one in Nova Scotia right now, some in New Brunswick. So we're pretty much that one shop where we are licensed or we're able to do national appraisal within a certain scope of work, depending on how the lender looks at it. So that's why I enjoy working at the firm that I do work for now, is because they incentivize business development. They focus heavily on AI for the appraisal packages. Everyone who thinks of an appraiser, they think of someone on a laptop writing the appraisal report. I can't really get into like how they have it structured, but they use AI to build that report and the technology that allows us to focus more on business development, building relationships, looking at data, meeting people for coffee in the industry, because that's what provides us a competitive advantage over those that are just using regular appraisal reports and having to write it full out.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. So you're covering a lot of ground, a lot of different types of properties. You have commercial multifamily as well, which is your bread and butter, like you said. Maybe we can dive into your journey then as an investor yourself.
So when I got started in 2019 in valuation in commercial real estate, I was, doing the values of these institutional clients, especially in multifamily, and I saw how they were able to force appreciate the values of the building. And then I understood, okay, how cap rates apply to net operating income, how how companies were optimizing the building through increasing revenue, reducing their operating expenses. And I'm like, shoot, like this is the formula. Like I need to be able to get to this level, but I have to be able to apply this on a smaller scale because mom and dad did not have any investment properties. So for me, it was kind of for me to get started and I had to get creative. So I bought my first property. Actually, before I did that, I put an offer on a pre-construction condo, Mobilio, which is just south of Highway 7 and north of 407 by Jane Street. I had a 10-day cooling period. It's a two-bedroom, two-bath. I think with parking it was about 560,000.
What year was this, by the way?
This was 2019 of April.
Okay.
So I was 24 and I was pushing myself to get into the market because then, well, everyone thought it was the peak of the market, but things were getting heated, prices were going up. And I felt that if I don't get into the market now, I'm going to be missing out on the opportunity, especially when I do decide to get married, start a family. But when I ran the numbers in terms of what the rental income would be upon closing, how much down payment it would require me to put in, it was 20% down. Now, to be honest, I could have bought something cheaper, like for 400,000, like one bedroom or a bachelor. But me being 24, it was more of an emotional purchase. Like, you want to be on that top unit with two bedroom corner unit. Like I did all that, which I did not have to. But I'm glad I did because I think if I did the mid 400s, I may have considered it. So I backed out within the 10-day cooling period. And then that summer, I was like, you know what? Let me figure some stuff out. And I pulled a map of Ontario, looked at some of the economic trends in different cities, and Windsor was doing really well. I went to Windsor, never been to Windsor, got an idea, went to multiple open houses, and bought a property for 257,000, single family, 3 bedroom, 1 bath with a basement, on the market. However, back then, a lot of the properties were being listed way below the price that it should be selling for. So if you want a $300,000 price, like you're typically listing for 199.
Yeah, to get multiple offers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this property was by a foreign investor, which really didn't know the market in Windsor, or I guess in Ontario, and he listed it at asking price, even though the agent told him to underlist it. So at that time, the property was listed for like 2-3 months, and then people just thought there was something wrong with it. I went in and got it for 257. I did not have the 20% down. I only had about $10,000 saved. Borrowed 40,000 from my parents, and then I closed on the building, and then I used the line of credit that I have to pay my parents off, like the day after closing. So building was rented for $1,800 a month plus utilities. I didn't really do tenant screening before. I kind of figured it out, and that tenant actually stopped paying rent. So I was basically paying for the building out of pocket. So after the first and last month's rent, maybe a couple of months afterward, they stopped. But I was cash flowing about $800 a month. So when COVID hit, they stopped paying rent. Long story short, they were doing some sketchy things. I caught them, and I'm like, hey, I can either take you to court for fraud or non-payment of rent. And during COVID, people were trying to figure out what the rules were. Got the tenant out, but luckily I broke even because the cash flow that I made for those 3 months kind of covered the 3 months I did not pay, or 3 or 4 months. And then after that, I rented it out to a good family, kind of learned my lesson. But during that same time, COVID hit. Before that, I went to a Keith Buyer workshop. free event kind of met someone who was presenting, and they were showing like development projects, these BRRRRs, conversion projects. And before I thought real estate investing was all about pre-construction, but I slowly realized that pre-construction was kind of gambling, or speculating was probably the right word, because depending on how you are structured, you're basically forecasting that the property value would be at this point when the closing happens. So everyone who did pre-construction is closing now, depending on what phase they bought in. Like, they're probably really stuck, in addition to their higher interest rates. So I decided to kind of put myself in rooms. COVID hit, so everything was online. Talking about the BRRRR strategy, how to qualify for multiple mortgages, vendor take-back mortgages. So for those that don't know, is when a seller finances a portion of the purchase price, but then you got to get creative with how you structure the deal. So these were the strategies that I was getting exposed to, and then I started implementing them. So since 2020, I've purchased about 13 buildings, more than 40 apartment units, with no joint venture partners, and it's all the rental income is coming to me. And it all came down to structuring the right deal and building relationships.
Okay, so let's recap. 2019, you have $10,000.
Yeah.
That's all the money you have, and I guess you went to a bank at some point and got access to a line of credit with at least 40,000 on it. You borrow 40K from your parents, close on the property. Right after, you take money out of your line of credit, pay them back, and now you have a mortgage and a line of credit to pay for, but you still have enough cash flow from the property to cover all your expenses and a surplus.
Exactly. And one thing I've got to mention, that single family home in June of 2020, so 8 months afterwards, I could have applied right away because I bought the building under market, but I didn't really know how financing works. So people said I have to wait 6 months. Some people said I had to wait 90 days to refinance. But then COVID hit, so everything just got delayed. So when I refinanced it in June 2020, it was appraised at 300,000, and that was like COVID comps, like using comps from like April and May, which was significantly discounted. So I pulled about $36,000 out, and that paid off my line of credit.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Makes sense. How do you go from having one property, a single family home in Windsor, to owning 14 properties?
So it really came down to understanding the value of buildings. So when we look at a building, an asking price, market value are two different things. There's market value as is, and what the market value would be upon completion of renovations. So to look at both, you got to look at comps. So residential, typically 1 to 4 units. You go to your agent, you ask them for MLS data, they pull the comps, and if you're buying a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, you're looking at other comps that are at the same structure, same layout, same square footage, land area, garage, and it continues. So for me, it was understanding that. In addition to my career, I kind of got exposed to all that. So when I bought my first off-market duplex, which was my first BRRRR, that was in November of 2020. It was $140,000 off market. Now, how I got this was
in Windsor also?
In Windsor.
Yeah.
Now, the agent that I used for my first building, during that time, I gave him a lot of referrals. So he made a lot of revenue through the referrals I brought in. And when it came to a point of summer of 2020 where I told him, hey, I'm ready to take action, I told him I want something discounted, something that requires a lot of work that somebody would not want to be dealing with. So this building had tenants that were selling drugs. They were not paying rent. Owners were not really managing the property. It required about $100,000 in renovation. So the seller didn't really want to take care of the tenants and put it on the market. So I came in and offered 140, and I didn't even have 20% down, which was 28,000. So for me, I did not want to have any joint venture partners. So the market value of the building as is was $250,000. So if I sold that same building on MLS, I could have sold that for $250,000. As renovated, similar buildings were being sold for about $350,000 and up. So that was where my target was in terms of value upon completion of renovations. So I looked at the market value as is, and based on the numbers, if I were to get a mortgage based on the market value as is, which is $250,000, 80% loan to value, which is the highest loan to value on a conventional mortgage, is $200,000. So $200,000 is $60,000 greater than my purchase price. So I can easily buy this in private money and take it to an A lender and refinance, and it would pay off the current mortgage. So what I did was, during that same summer, I reached out to a lot of my networks and told them the education that I had, and I found someone that was willing to provide private money for $150,000, which covered my down payment and the cash for keys, as well as the closing cost. So 150 all in. I had about the $40,000 line of credit that I initially had. I had another 10,000 available, so I put 50,000 in my own money, and I went to a buddy's of mine. I'm like, hey, I'll pay you $50,000 at 10% interest only payment. The 150 was also 10% interest only payment, and by then rates back then were really cheap, so private money was also cheap then. So my all in cost was 260, with the private money, the holding cost.
With the renovation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 260. Imagine being 25 at that time, having $260,000 loan that you have paid off. You have no
At
rent.
10% interest for the most part.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was living below, like COVID. Excuse me, COVID was there, so everyone was working from home. I sold my car during the summer. It was a 2011 Nissan Sentra. I sold it for $3,000. Didn't really drive around with renting cars to see these buildings. So I really lived below my limits. 6 months later, I got it appraised for $389,000. So the value of the building kind of went up during the stabilization period. So my new mortgage was $311,000. So that paid off my 260. So I made $50,000 in additional equity that I got to keep myself to reinvest in other buildings. Now, the one thing that a lot of people forget is that you want to qualify based on a rental income. So when I was running these projections, I was underwriting it to ensure that based on the rental income on the new mortgage I refinanced, that I was able to qualify for a mortgage using the rental income rather than my personal salary. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. It's called a zero impact property based on some of the experts that were providing these online webinars, is where you want the monthly rental income to be minimum 2 times the monthly mortgage. So if your monthly mortgage is 1,000, your monthly rental income has to be minimum 2,000 or greater. So you can only find these in secondary and tertiary markets. Toronto is very hard, and depending on the number of units you have, pre-construction for sure, single family, you're not going to have that. So my own monthly rental income was just under 3,000. Mortgage was just 1,100. Qualified for the mortgage. During that same time, I was searching other buildings to buy. So Sudbury was basically the last major metropolitan city that had yet to be touched in Ontario. Southwestern Ontario, everything was pretty much was monetized and fluctuated with all these investors. Eastern Ontario, same thing. Peterborough, same thing. North Bay, I looked into it, didn't really find it attractive. Barrie was already pretty much fluctuated with a lot of major investors. So Sudbury was a major option that I had. So I bought a duplex for $260. That down payment of $50,000 was my 20% down. So I got that duplex under contract of December of 2020, just after buying that duplex, and I had $260,000 loan. So I basically projected the ARV, and I was like, I'm going to take the profits of this and use it as a down payment. And I had a 6-month closing. So this was appraised and refinanced in May of 2021. And the duplex in Sudbury that I bought was closing in June. Mm-hmm. And I just transitioned it over. And then same thing, I had a triplex, sold my single family home, because once your rental income and debt servicing became tight, it became more of a liability to your debt servicing mm-hmm. and how much you can qualify. So I decided to sell it off market for $380.
The first house that you bought.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I bought it for $257. 17 months later, sold it for $380 mm-hmm. Off market, no commission fees, cashed out $130,000 after legal fees and before taxes. So that $130, a portion of it was used to buy a triplex. So that was April of 2021. So I was basically getting buildings under contract and having all the dominoes lined up because I wanted my money to recycle. So I bought a vacant off-market triplex in Sudbury, a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, bought it for $380. A couple of months later, it was appraised for $575,000 with only $60,000 in renovation. The duplex I bought for $265,000 after $30,000 or $30,000 to $40,000 in renovation, it was appraised for $400,000. And that's how the money kept rolling, property by property.
So what you were doing is basically buying under market value and buying properties that had problems that people didn't want to fix or address, and you were addressing them and quickly refinancing them.
Some of them didn't have a lot of issues. They were just cosmetic renovations, mm-hmm. but they were just discounted because I bought them off market. And a lot of people don't really want to sell on the market. They just want to get a buyer who is going to close within a short amount of time. And that was what I had to offer. But yeah, discounted properties. that could have been sold for higher, as well as market value of the building upon completion of renovations.
So it helps that you have the appraisal background because you know the ARV after repair value, and you know how much money approximately you have to put into this place, and
Right.
the math all adds up and works out.
Yeah. So even though I didn't do residential appraisal, a lot of the fundamentals in terms of price per unit, what to look for, you can still apply it. It's transferable skills, and that's what I was doing. And a lot of people ask, "Hey, like, how do you even know what the market is?" I was driving up to Sudbury 2, 3 times a week, like staying at hotels. Like same thing with Windsor. Like you need to spend time in the market, understand the tenant demographic of each neighborhood, and you need to spend time talking to realtors or even local people. I tend not to ask questions to realtors if I don't have a personal relationship with, because I don't know if they're going to be biased or not, especially being a rookie. But now, knowing what I know, like I can talk to realtors, but I used to talk to people that were locally in those neighborhoods because they will provide the more concrete information because they're from the neighborhood.
Yeah, and just to go back to that second property, the duplex that you were talking about, you shared a lot of numbers and stuff, and some people might be a little bit confused. But just to kind of recap it, and do an overview, you bought private money because it's easier to exit once you have a private mortgage if you're refinancing quickly after with an A lender, as opposed to like going to Scotia or TD, getting the initial mortgage, then like 3 months later saying, "Oh, I think the value is 200,000 more than what I bought it for." They might be like, "No, hold on, it's too soon." Right?
They're especially in the market right now. A lot of lenders are being like, "Hey, you need to wait a bit."
Yeah.
Back then, I could have gone if I had the 20% down. Two things: based on the purchase on the appraisal, some lenders may not want to lend on the building if there's a lot of work to do with it. So in this case, it went private because I didn't have the 20% down. But there are buildings now where I've had to close private because the market, it's just the conventional loans are not being able to, conventional lenders are not willing to lend to someone who has like 14 buildings.
Yeah, yeah.
So because due to the rate hike and due to the exposure, but CIBC has a great rental program. Now they may have changed it now, but when I was investing, what they do is that for non-condo buildings, so single family, multifamily, they take the annual rental income, take 80% of that, subtract the annual property taxes, and they divide it by the annual mortgage payments at the stress test. So P&I, so principal and interest, and so they're underwriting the building based on 5.25 back then. So now it's not
5.25 what percent?
Yeah.
Oh, interest.
So 5.25.
Yeah.
To what your mortgage payment at 5.25. So even though I was buying buildings at 1.33% on a mortgage, 30-year amortization, my those buildings were able to qualify at 5.25%. So the reason why I'm able to kind of go through our current economic conditions is because if my buildings are being able to be sustained at 5.25, like I'm pretty much good to go.
Choosing the right mortgage product isn't always about the lowest interest rate. My name is Don Chen, mortgage agent with Pineapple Financial. And here are the two things you need to keep in mind. First, exit cost. Does your mortgage product incur a high penalty cost when you need to refinance or make any adjustments to your mortgage, or if you need to sell your property? Secondly, equity accessibility. If you need to access equity that has been built up, does your mortgage product allow you to do that freely and also in the most cost-effective manner? These two things will put the most amount of dollars in your pocket and help you get ready for your next real estate project. I would love to connect with you for all your mortgage-related questions. You can reach me at 647-961-3281, or you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Mortgage Dawn.
Are you saying that with that CIBC example, that they're not looking at your personal finances, they're looking at the income generated by the property
Exactly.
at a 5.25% rate? Right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So the formula, so with that formula, you have to be at a 1.1 debt servicing or higher, which means that for every $1.10 of income, there can only be $1 of expense.
yeah.
So that's how they were underwriting it, which at 1.1 at 5.25 at the stress test, like you're pretty self-sufficient.
It's a more commercial approach as opposed to if you're getting a conventional mortgage, they're asking you for your pay stubs and your notice of assessment and this and that, looking at your income and all your debts and calculating it on.
They still do all that. But the reason why is because for me to qualify for multiple mortgages, I still got residential financing at 80% loan to value, but I had to make sure they were using my income to wash off the debt of the property. What happens with a lot of the coaching students that I have, they buy a pre-construction condo or they buy a single family home. But when you're buying a building and they're using your personal income to qualify you for the mortgage,
Yeah.
that's typical. They look at your car payments, what else do you have financed, and they take all that into consideration to see what your debt servicing is. And then when you want to refinance at that new value, for you to qualify at that new 80%, they're taking all that into consideration, and if you can qualify for that new mortgage. What I did was, there's only so many times I'm going to get qualified for a mortgage using my personal income. If if a lender is willing to lend me money based on the performance of the asset, which is typical how commercial multifamily or commercial lending works, but I can do that on the residential side. Even Scotiabank, you can get up to 10 mortgages if you follow, they have another formula, but it's basically your rental income has to be minimum 2 times your monthly mortgage. They will continue to lend money because you're a low risk client. You only get rejected from banks when they start using your own personal income to debt service the mortgages of the building, because you get more exposed to what the current economic conditions are. So for me was, I want to buy buildings that the banks were willing to lend on, which is different than so let me take a step back. What we think is an investment property is different than what a bank thinks is an investment property. So as a lot of real estate agents, a lot of investors who are looking to get in, they think that what is an investment product is based on the information that is provided from an agent or based on family and friends. But you forget to see, you want to always ask how many buildings do they own. Now, if you're making half $500,000 in income, then yeah, for sure, like you have the income to qualify for a lot of these mortgages. But most people in the GTA or across Canada, they're probably around the six figures. So you only have 1 or 2 buildings, maybe 3 buildings, depending on what you're buying, to qualify for, and then you're going to get capped out, and then you may have to go to the B lenders. So for me, it was how to maximize a lot of the conventional loans, and it was strictly finding what those formulas were and finding buildings that met those formulas and giving it to the bank. And I was getting conditional approvals from these banks within 24 hours to 48 hours because they were just debt servicing really good.
Yeah. And also, just as a little caveat for that CIBC product, I think there's a minimum requirement of at least having 3 properties before you can qualify. Like if you're just brand new and it's your first property, I don't think you'd be able to qualify for that product.
Exactly.
Because I do have one with them as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I had my first building, it was with the duplex that went private to conventional with RBC. And then when I went to CIBC, I had 2 closings within the same month. So it was automatically at 3.
Yeah.
And then after that, it just became that. And then also, a lot of these lenders, as you buy more buildings, they want to know how much cash reserve you have. So ideally, you want the minimum cash reserve is 6 figures, so 100,000. It could be liquid, so cash, RESP, RSPs, stocks. So for me, being at that age, it was like, how are you going to have 100,000 sitting in your bank account? So what I did was I structured myself in a way where when I had a refinance go through, I was always doing 2 buildings at the same time. So I was cashing out 2 buildings. So that duplex I bought of June 2021 for $265, I cashed out about $104,000. And around the same time, I cashed out $165,000 from that triplex because we got appraised from $380 to $575 with only $60,000 in renovation. So I was cashing out a significant amount of money. So when I was buying my my 4th building, I had that cash, so I had the 20% down to buy the building. Once they closed the building, then you already have a second building in purchase. Mm-hmm. So then you use that to close on it. So it's like a domino effect. You're trying to use the bank's regulations and trying to meet them legally, but then you're trying to play the rules to the best of your ability.
Sure. Yeah. That's really cool. You grew really fast, so you were pretty much buying like roughly 3 properties a year to get to 14, right? Within a 4-year period?
Yes. So 2019, October was my first. October of 2020 was 2. And then 2021, I bought 4. Mm-hmm. And then in 2022, I bought 7 or 6.
Oh yeah, and all of those ones were in Sudbury?
All of them were in Sudbury. Yeah. So after that triplex of June of 2021, 380 to 575, I started putting offers on vendor take-back mortgages. So that's when I just had to diversify my income because I was buying all these buildings. So I needed to leverage money from someone else And I was like, well, the best way to leverage money will be from the seller. Now, for depending on your exposure to the real estate networking industry, most people never heard of what a vendor take back mortgage was, including myself. I still remember the first time I told my parents, yeah, the seller is securing money against the building. Like, they're like, that's never heard of. So, but I spent a year learning how to offer on building, and I always got rejected because I was not incentivizing the seller the right way. So when it comes to a VTB mortgage, you need to understand, why would the seller want to basically lend you money, secure it against the asset they're selling, and why would they be in a position to even lend that money? So it's not physical cash, it's just a note that they would get at the time of refinance. So for example, August of 2021, so at that time, I had those two duplex and triplex being BRRR'd. I saw an off-market duplex. So it was a wholesale deal. For those of you who don't know, a wholesale deal is basically when it's like a middleman. Somebody gets a building under contract and they assign it to someone else for an assignment fee. So I saw an on-market duplex, and I figured that it did not go through based on the conversation I had with the investors that were trying to purchase it. I went back to the wholesaler, got it under contract for $330. So the asking was $360. Got it for $330. Paid him $5,000 just to get it, and then I started having the conversation with the seller. The seller did not want to keep this building because they had a gym that they were operating. So during COVID, a lot of gyms were losing a lot of money, and 2 tenants were not paying rent. So I know 3 things. They wanted $360. They sold it for a loss. Tenants were not paying rent, so they're not getting any additional income, and they're losing money on their gym. So and overall, they need more money. The second thing is, how long have they owned the building? So they owned the building for a decade, and I pulled the Geo warehouse and I saw how much what they bought it for. So I knew they had significant equity in it. So I incentivized her, saying that, you know what, I would be willing to offer you $340,000 if you were to secure a 10% vendor take back mortgage in second position. So what that means is that 10% of 340, they would secure $34,000 on the building. My down payment was only 10%. So $34,000, and I had a credit union qualify me for a mortgage for 80% loan to value. A lender do not allow vendor take back mortgages. Credit union, depending on the ones you work for and the debt servicing, they would allow it. So 80% from the lender, I put 34. They secured a note against the building. So the seller got all their money minus the $34,000 that they got. It was all done through lawyers. And I was paying her 6% interest-only payment on a monthly basis.
That's really cheap for a second. But yeah, at the same time, back then, the interest rate was cheaper.
It was low, but also when you're dealing with sellers that are not exposed to the private market, they don't really know, like 6% then, like they're like, oh shit, a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think I was only.
But did you register it as a charge on title?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the day of
and the
closing.
credit union was okay with that, even though 2 of the tenants weren't paying rent.
So on closing, I had 1 unit vacant, and one tenant was paying rent. So yeah, they were okay with it because for 340, they were using market rents, and it was significantly under market value. So I bought that building, put in it was a single family home with an in-law suite. So technically, it wasn't a legal duplex. Mm-hmm. So I legalized the unit, which I didn't have to do much work because it was already an existing unit. I just had to meet certain requirements. Put a second hydrometer. So I think the renovation cost was about $50,000 to $60,000. So my all-in cost was $340 plus closing costs $60,000. So just around $400,000. The building got appraised for $615,000. So my new mortgage was 76% loan to value, was about $470, and the rental income on it was the top unit, which the tenant I got out. I'm getting $2,200 a month, and the basement unit I'm getting $1,800. So my monthly rental income was $4,000, just over $4,000, and my mortgage was $2,200 a month. So, and that's, I refinanced it twice because there was some work that had to be done to it, and there was additional equity left. So that was on the second mortgage, second refinance that I did within a span of 3 months. So it was cash flowing really well. During that refinance, that $470 that I got, paid off the $34,000, cleared it, paid off the credit union mortgage, and I got the renovation money paid off, and I had the additional equity to continue to recycle. Now, the reason why I wanted a VTB on that building, because at that same time, I got an off-market 5-unit biplex, fully turnkey on the inside for $450,000. So that's less than $100,000 a unit in Sudbury, Ontario.
From a wholesaler as well?
No, from an agent. So he owned the building and he was trying to liquidate. So this is when your relationships come very key. Hence social media, word of mouth. And I wanted everyone in Sudbury to know, if you want a deal or you want it to close quick, go to Myuren. He'll be willing to work with you. So I purchased the building, but at that time I only had $100,000 enough to close, $100,000 left. So I was like, if I have a duplex for $340 and I had a fiveplex for $450, and when you go commercial, 25%, I didn't have the down payment to buy both. Hence why I wanted to push for a vendor take back for the duplex. And then I went to the seller for the fiveplex. He was more of an investor, which, excuse me, once you get into commercial, vendor take back mortgages are more frequent.
Yeah.
So the seller knew what it was. He did a lot of commercial deals. He had a lot of commercial investments as well. So he said, the only question I asked him, that was probably my easiest vendor take back mortgage deal. I was like, how much do you need from the profits? He was like, only $400,000. He had no mortgage on the deal. I'm like, you want to secure $50,000 against the property? He was like, sure. So that was 10% interest only payment. So my down payment was only 14%. 14%.
That was through a credit union as well?
Same credit union.
Yeah.
So vendor take back 11% down payment from the seller. I put 14%. I bought it for $450 in November of 2021 or October of 2021. It was appraised in December of 2021 for $715,000. So significant equity, only about $60,000 in renovation for exterior work. But the biggest focus that I need on my real estate portfolio was quality building, quality units, quality layouts. So that building did not meet any of those requirements because I just bought it because it was a really good deal. So once that first rate hike was announced in March or February of 2022, I was like, you know what? I need to deleverage. I started following or listening to podcasts from people who are investing in the 1980s, talking about that real estate market. I'm like, you know what? Having assets is great, but being liquid is where you want to be. I sold that building off market for $790,000. The initial offer was $815, and there was some work that had to be done. So they countered at $790. So I was like, you know what? Just take it. Like for $450 to $790 in like less than 6 months, I'm more than happy to like sell it. So I sold the building and I cashed out just more than $300,000 and before taxes. And that allowed me to pay some private money from like renovation loan that I borrowed. So I deleveraged a lot. Had I not sold that building, I would probably not be where I am today or as comfortable as I am today. So sold that. But during the same time, when I was buying the fiveplex and the duplex, I came across an 11-unit building portfolio as well as a triplex. And when you see good deals, it's not about how can I can't afford it. It's all about focusing on how can I get the deal to work. So that 11 unit was listed on the market for $1.4 million. And being as an investor for only less than 2 years, getting into the $1 million price point is very difficult because you need to be in the market and have a lot of cash reserve in order to be able to get to that price point. So that was on the market for quite some time. 1.4 million. They weren't really budgeting on price, and I found another building that was being listed by the same agent. Found out that it was by the same seller. That asking price for that triplex was $389,000. So what I did was I offered on the triplex for $300,000 with 2 vacant units, but on the MLS it didn't say it was any vacant units. It said it was all occupied. And the rental income that they had on the MLS was based on the contract rents that they were all occupied. And it was about $8,000 of annual rental income. That's like a cash flow on some buildings. So it was significantly low, but since it was vacant, not many people knew that. Offered $300,000, and then I offered for $1.1 million on the 11 units. But on the 11 units, I said this offer is conditional upon the triplex being accepted. So they had to accept the triplex in order for them to work on the 11 unit, because they would rather sell a $1.4 million building and let go of a triplex because they just want more cash. So the $300,000 closed in January 2022. The 11 unit, we went back and forth. We came at $1.3 million with the vendor take back mortgage. So they put 12.7% BTB, so it was about 106.
12.7% interest.
The reason why I went at 12.7% is because the credit union was only willing to lend 12.7 maximum in I would only allow a first position mortgage if there's a VTB at a maximum of 12.7%.
Okay.
So I just put 12.7% of the purchase price.
For a second mortgage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was at 10% interest only payment.
Oh, you're saying the loan to value was 12.7.
No. Yeah, loan to value.
Yeah.
The loan to purchase price.
Okay.
So 1.3 million, 12.7% was 165,100.
Okay.
My down payment was 12.3%, which was 159,900. And the credit union lended 75% loan to value, which is about 975.
Are you able to share what credit union that is, or you don't want to do that? If you don't want to, it's fine.
I can't do that, unfortunately.
Okay.
But they are like the top 5 credit unions in Ontario.
Okay.
And so the only reason why I knew they were able to do it because I was calling a lot of these credit unions and I had to find opportunities where I can make these deals work. So 75% loan to value, closed on the building. So how did I get the down payment? I needed
just to touch on that. So 75% loan to value from the credit union, plus you got a 12.7% second position VTB, so you're at 87% loan to value total.
Exactly.
You're putting less than 13% down.
Yeah. So my social media, when I was closing this deal, I'm like, and there's an 11 units. So it was cheaper for me to buy this building and getting 11 tenants than buying $1 million property and putting 20% down on a single family home. So on paper, yeah, you have a nice home for $1 million, but who's actually more wealthier? Somebody who is collecting rental income from 11 tenants, or you owning a single family home and putting $200,000 home. So that's where I kind of get my social media and get a lot of content and followers and interactions, because I'm trying to make people to think about how to generate income first before buying a liability. And the definition of a liability is when you're using your own personal income to service debt, which is a primary home.
Yeah.
Whereas an investment property, ideally you're leveraging debt to produce income, which is good debt. Just real estate 101. So how I bought that building is that triplex I bought for $300, which is significantly discounted. Renovated the building, and it was for $40,000. I only had to renovate 2 of the units. I qualified based on the rental income to debt service. Based on that formula, it was appraised for $675,000.
Wow.
So I cashed out $285,000 in 4 months. That same time, so April last week, I got that amount and bought the 11-unit building, and my down payment was only $159,000 for that plus closing costs.
So your 11-unit building closed several months after your triplex closed, and that was part of your agreement.
Yeah,
you're only buying the triplex or only buying the 11-unit if you can buy the triplex.
Because I needed leverage.
Yeah.
Right, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to go borrow private money or close private. I wanted to leverage one to buy the other. So this is when it's all about the domino effect. You have to think 6 months ahead. How do you want everything to line up? It could work, it could not work, but you want to do the best of your ability to control your closing. Yeah. So a week later, bought that. But in February of 2021, so a month after I bought that triplex, and I had the 11-unit closing, I saw a fourplex that I really wanted to buy. And it was a purpose-built, beautiful fourplex. And like I mentioned before, quality building, quality layout, quality units to track the high end of the market rent. So this was a 3-bedroom, 1 3-bedroom unit, and 3 2-bedroom units. And the tenants were paying hydro and electricity. So it was listed on Kijiji for $630,000. And I saw this building listed on the market the year before, and it was listed for $499,000, and this individual bought it for $575,000. Rental income was extremely low. He didn't do anything during the 1-year ownership, but this was more of an emotional purchase at that time, because I'm like, you know what, I'm buying all these buildings. I'm in a position to be able to make a slight emotional purchase based on the quality of the building. So when I went to the credit union to give me a mortgage, they only approved me for 49% loan to value. And I'm like, I'm not putting $330,000 down.
That's because of the rental income, the really low rental income. Yeah.
So, and the other thing was I'm buying under corporation, so I have nothing tied to my personal name. So with that, based on the credit union and how mortgages work, some lenders lend based on corporations, some lenders lend based on you as an individual. So credit unions typically lend based on corporation. So I've exceeded my corporation mortgage amount to qualify me at their debt servicing was at 1.25. Sorry, it was at 1.1. They were qualifying me based on one debt servicing ratio, and now they're qualifying me at 1.25 because I've exceeded that amount.
Yeah.
So now my qualification and leverage became much lower. So the only way to do it was open another corporation. But when you open another corporation, you get exposed to like corporation fees. You got a bookkeeping, legal fees, and I just did not want to get that. So there's something called the trust agreement, where you can buy a property under your personal name and then refinance it to your corporation without paying land transfer tax. So I saw this by an accountant on social media that I was following, and I'm like, you know what, I got to be able to apply this. So when I bought it under my personal name, I did not own any property. So technically, I had no mortgages. Mm-hmm. So the credit union provided me with 67% loan to value. So my down payment now went from like 51% to 33%. Went back to the seller, and the seller did not want to engage in a vendor take-back mortgage. So I just got the building under contract. Sometimes, as long as you have a conditional period, you just have to kind of bluff. So I got a 10-day financing a clause, or I think it was 5 to 10 days, and I kind of bluffed during that time because I knew I'm not buying the building without a VTB because there's no way I'm putting 33% down. He provided me with a 12% vendor take-back in second position because I told him, hey, rates are going up. You're not going to be able to sell it at the purchase price, and I'm willing to provide you with your asking price if you were to give me a VTB mortgage. And he did not want to provide me with any vacant units. So bought the building for $630. So the 11 unit closed on April of 29th of 2022. The refinance of the triplex happened the week before. $265 bought the 11 unit. May 4th, so Friday was the closing of the 11 unit. May 4th or May 2nd was a Monday, I bought the 4-unit building. So I bought 15 units in a span of like 2 days with leveraging creative financing. So that 4-unit building did about 40,000 in I think 40 to 60,000 in renovations. 2 of the units I turned over, I got appraised for 890,000. Refinanced it, paid the BTB off. The 11 unit, renovated that. I turned over 7 of the 11 units. I got appraised for 2.1 million. So that's based on the net operating income. So that's different.
How are you turning over these units so fast? Like, are you just doing cash for keys?
Some are cash for keys. The 11 unit, the tenants wanted to leave, so they just left. We just said that, hey, new ownership, we got to do some work to the building. I do have an employee that works specifically for me in Sudbury, and she just spoke with the tenants, and they left on their own terms. So 7 of the units turned over. And then based on the net operating income and at a 5.75% cap rate based on the NOI per unit, it was appraised by just under 2.1 million. Mm-hmm. So now that's under CMHC application. I've submitted my application, paid the application fee. I'm getting about 85 to, I think around 85% loan to value. But based on the underwriting in June of 2023, I was getting qualified for just over 1.63 million as a new mortgage. So I'm going to be cashing out around $500,000. The rental income on that building is about $13,000 to $14,000 a month. So it's definitely a great product to kind of hold in my portfolio. But CMHC, for those who don't know, on the commercial side, there's a lot of products available, different financing strategies, depending on energy efficiency, affordability, or the standard. That's we want to work with a good commercial mortgage agent. So that's one refinance that I'm working with that. And then since then, in the last 12 months, I bought 2 buildings. I'm not going to really get into that because we can continue to talk forever. Yeah. But same strategy, get creative. So as of right now, and during that same time, I bought a 5-plex for 540,000. It was a 4-unit with a 5th unit illegal. Legalized that building. Bought it for 540. It was appraised for 965. Turned over 4 of the 5 units. Did cash for keys for 1 of the units. And I got 65% loan to value. So I cashed out about $230,000 from that as well.
Nice. Yeah. So it sounds like things have gone really well, and I'm sure that along the way there have been challenges. Sure. Just really quickly, do you want to share maybe some of the challenges you've gone through or some of the stress you felt, some of the things that have gone completely wrong?
Before I hired an employee, now I'm in a lot of real estate masterminds. Well, I'm part of one real estate mastermind that has a lot of events where I'm putting myself with a lot of high level individuals doing land development. So it's not like I just do this for fun. Like I investing in myself. I probably spent about $60,000 in my own personal development in real estate masterminds. So when I got started, there's a difference between being a landlord and being a business owner in real estate. So a landlord is, you collecting all the income, you dealing with all the maintenance, all the issues. So before I hired my employee, I was getting stressed because the contracting, like I didn't have anyone because I live in Woodbridge, so I didn't have anyone to verify the project, someone to boots on the ground to oversee it. I didn't have the right relationships. I've had to burn bridge with some contractors because they just weren't doing the work that they were supposed to. So it's trial and error. Like it's very difficult unless you live in the city to be there. And I had to kind of manage the business being away from home because I still work a full-time career that also requires business development because my full-time career is based on the revenue that I generate. So once I had the 11 unit under contract, I had to hire someone, and I wanted it to be someone that I had control over rather than outsourcing it to a property management company. So typically, property management companies offer about 8 to 12%, depending on if they're charging for leasing fees and there's certain repairs and maintenance fees. Whereas for me, I'm paying $20 an hour, and it's based on the services that they provide, but there's no leasing fee, there's no nothing. So in the beginning, because a lot of my units were vacant because they were being renovated, with the monthly rental income that I was getting, I was paying about 15% a month. But as it continues to stabilize it, now my property management fees are only about 6% of my overall monthly rental income. So my monthly rental income right now is about $60,000 a month, and I'm paying about 6%. So I get more control over the quality and the service for my tenants, because for me, it's not about housing as a need, it's housing as a service. Like I do not want to fall under a slumlord. I do not want to be there. Like I want to have my units as units that I want to live in. So we make sure the renovations are good quality. The property manager gets to ensure that the contractors are doing what they're told to. If they're not doing it the right way, because contractors might show me videos, but I'm not really going to see everything and like based on a video. So just getting that secondary eye and just trying to build a team. And I'm still trying to build efficiency. So I've hired a virtual assistant. I think the next thing for me will be hiring someone to focus on acquisition, the financing, somebody that can work with one-on-one and more of an executive assistant.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing really well. I hope things continue to on this path for you, and you continue to grow your portfolio and reach all your goals. To finish things off, how do people reach you, and what services are you providing?
So Instagram will be the best way for you to reach out to me. So Myuren C, Myurenc. There's a coaching link that you can reach out to me. It's $200 an hour. What I charge one-on-one, kind of talk about, depending on where you want, or you want to learn about the strategies.
Or what credit union you use.
Yeah, credit union.
$200 an hour. I'm just joking.
Credit union, for me, because I don't want to give that credit union because financing has changed.
Yeah.
So it's just that with the landscaping changing, it's very difficult for me to, I don't want to share that information and then not being treated now.
I get it. Yeah.
And then also for commercial valuations, like if you have a commercial deal that you're working with, I'm more than happy to take a look at it. If you want to be retained as a client, we can definitely do that. We service across Ontario. Ideally, we want to be south of Sudbury within a 4-hour radius of the GTA. I specialize primarily in multifamily, but we have people on our team that do like all sorts of asset classes across Canada. So we're more than happy to help you guys out.
Awesome. Myuren, thank you for doing this, for sharing. I think you're going to inspire a lot of people because, you were doing things when there was a lot of fear, when people weren't sure about real estate in 2020, what's going to happen. You went and bought a bunch of properties and you did really well. So it's inspiring to hear that. Mm-hmm. And I hope that people that are listening will go out there and take more action.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the one thing that I want to just put out there is that there's only so much we can control in the market. And the three biggest things that we can control is inflation, the value of real estate, and interest rates. Like, unfortunately, that's out of our reach. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that we can control is income. So if you have quality tenants and you have those quality services available, you can always control the amount of rental income you have. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's about time in the market. So as long, even though some values of my buildings have decreased, they're still debt servicing itself. I'm still cash flowing. Do I wish the situation was better? 100%. But focus on things that you can control rather than trying to speculate where the market is. Hence why I don't focus on pre-construction, because I have less control over where the values are. So if I'm buying a building, I know what the after repair value would be based on comparables. Like, those are facts. Hence why you work with investor-focused real estate agents that can provide you with that data.
100%. Well, again, thank you for doing this, and I look forward to hearing more about what you do in the future, and we'll stay in touch.
Appreciate that, man. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Well Off Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then I'd really appreciate if you left us a review on iTunes and let us know your thoughts. In order for us to get a larger audience, it's really important to have reviews, so your support is extremely appreciated. And also, don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and family. Until next time, I'm George Almasri. Have a great day.